welcome back. Before we went on the break, we were talking about the African Union. Let me recap on what we talked about. We talked about, first of all, we started with tips on how you can make the UTME, and we entered the topic for today. We talked about the parliamentary system of government and all that. Now we're looking at African Union. And I said, before African Union came into existence, we had what we called the OAU. Remember the OAU? Yes, OAU, Organization of African Unity. Organization of African Unity. And I said the OAU was established or formed in 1963, May 1963. And one of the key players we have the likes of what do you call it? Kwame Nkrumah and others. So that one of the reasons for the establishment of the OAU, at that time, colonialism was still at its peak. Many African countries had not broken free from the grips of their colonial masters. So one of the aim was to see to it that countries in Africa gained their independence. In fact, in 1960 alone, over 10 African countries became independent. In 1960 alone. So take note of that. So that was why it was established. Sometime in 2002, almost 2002, over 30 years of its existence, when they met in South Africa, Thabo Mbeki, who happened to be the last leader of the Organization of African Unity, they thought it wise that, okay, since the aim of OAU has been achieved, let us have another body that will unite Africans together. And that was how they founded the African Union. It was initiated by the former Libyan leader, Muammar Gaddafi. Yes. So they felt it was something that would unite Africans together. So 2002, July, African Union was established after 39 years of OAU in existence. So they had to put away OAU and they brought what? African Union. This year, African Union will be 21 years. 21 years. Last year they celebrated their 20th anniversary. So this year they'll be 21 years in July. Now, let's go to the next slide. So this is just a brief history of how it all started. It says the 37th summit of the Organization of African Unity held between the 9th and 13th of July 2001, when the protocol establishing what the AU was signed. That was when they signed it. Now we'll have something called African Union, no longer what Organization of African Unity. And this summit was held in Togo, and it was the last OAU summit held. And African Union has 53 members, which include every African nation except Morocco, which withdrew from the OAU in 1985. Okay, so this is just a brief history of the OAU and the African Union. Take note of this. Now let's go to the next slide. Now let's look at the aims and objectives. When I was explaining tricks to passing UTME government, I talked about knowing the aims and objectives of these organizations. Now let's look at the aims and objectives of African Union. It says 1, to promote democracy and fundamental human rights. Before now, okay, in 1990, towards the late 90s and the late 80s and the early 1990s, countries like Liberia had its civil war, and there were cases of serious human rights abuse. So these are one of the things OAU stands to promote: fundamental human rights. Now again, to facilitate economic development in Africa, the issue of economic development in Africa is a key issue in Africa. And they felt we can come together as a body and see how we can grow our continent. We grow our regions, then grow our continents economically. Now, it says to end the senseless wars and conflicts causing so much pain and suffering to Africa. There have been several wars. Nigeria had its own. From 1967 to 1970, Nigeria had a 30-month war. 30-month war. So the Nigerian Civil War lasted for 30 months. Take note of that. So these are one of the things. Then we had the Liberian Civil War. This was also another thing, the Liberian Civil War. So these are part of the issue to put an end to the sufferings and the senseless wars. Now to defeat poverty, disease, and ignorance. Now let's go. Let me talk a little about poverty, putting poverty, suffering, and disease together. One of the countries in Africa that has been having war is Somalia. It has led to the loss of lives and property, the serious famine, and all that in Somalia. So these are one of the things we're talking about. Already, most people in Africa, or let's say some people in Africa, are already poor. Very few that the economy is thriving. So take note of this. Then to promote deep and strong political, economic, and social integration among member states. Had there been coups? Yes. Africa had several coups. So these are one of the things African Union planned to achieve. Unity. Now to introduce a single currency for the African continent. This has not been achieved. The last one has not been achieved. So take note of this. Let's go to the next slide. Okay. Now, before I go to the next topic, we've been able to look at the African Union, the aims and objectives. I'm going to give you a task. Go home and study the problems of the African Union. The problems of the African Union and the achievements of the African Union. They've been able to achieve a lot. So go study on your own. So let's look at another topic. Military. I had to put it, I didn't want to go to military intervention in Nigeria. I'm going to talk about it, but let's look at reasons for military intervention in politics. Reasons for military intervention in politics. Before we start talking about this, I will give you an introduction on military rule in Nigeria. Just briefly, look at this. The first coup in Nigeria happened in January 15th, 1966. January 15th, 1966. And who were the people that were killed in that coup? Nigeria's first Prime Minister, Tafawa Balewa. Who again? Akintola, the Premier of the Western region. Who again? Ahmadu Bello, Premier of the Northern region. These were the people that were killed in that coup. There were some other people. I just mentioned these three key persons. And who led that coup? It was led by Chukwuma Nzogu Kaduna. Chukwuma Nzogu Kaduna. He was a military officer. He led that coup. And that coup led to the death of more than 5 persons. That coup led to the death of more than what? 5 persons. After that, there was another coup. Exactly 6 months and 14 days. Another coup happened. And that coup was still July 15th, 1966. July 15th, 1966. July 15th, 1966. That was when the second coup took place. 9 years later, another coup occurred. It was led by Yakubu Gowon. Take note of that. History has it that Yakubu Gowon happens to be one of Nigeria's youngest leaders at that time. So there have been 5 bloody coups in Nigeria. 5 bloody coups in Nigeria. So I will leave you to study more about military, about the several coups, the successful coup and the unsuccessful coups in Nigeria. I want you to study them. Study who organized the coup and all that. Remember, one of the coups that happened led to the Civil War. Remember. So I also want you to study the Civil War. What are the immediate causes and what are the remote causes? So take note of this. So now let's look at the reasons for military intervention in politics. I just did this to introduce the topic. So what are the reasons for military intervention in politics? Number 1, when the process of changing political leadership is in doubt, the military will do what? Intervene. When there are lots of scuffles, we don't want this person, the military does what? Intervene. And we have seen them intervening several times in Nigerian politics. Take note of this. Number 2, politicization of the army. The army should not be politicized. So when such a thing happens, the military does what? Steps in. The military steps in. The issue of nepotism, tribalism, favoritism, which perverts justice. There's one of the coups that is referred to as an Igbo coup. That I'm just explaining this to you. When you study, you must find out more. So these are the reasons why the military intervenes in politics. Let's look at the next one. Okay. Number 4, regional differences. Differences among the regions. Yes. Before Nigeria's independence, at the time Nigeria gained her independence, there were 3 regions. We had the northern region, we had the western region, and we had the eastern region at that time. Then towards the middle of the 1960s, we now had the Midwestern region. So there were regional differences. Take note of this. So it said regional differences among regions were acute to precipitate crises, leading to the direct assumption of power. When a region has been sidelined or marginalized, this is what happens. Now let's look at the next one. Mismanagement of the economy, of the national economy. The Shehu Shagari administration. The Shehu Shagari administration of 1983 is a typical example. That administration ended with a coup. Because the military government of Muritala and General Obasanjo, they handed over to the Shehu Shagari administration. But the Shehu Shagari administration was cut short due to a coup at that time. So let's go for another break. So take care. Thank you.